Okay, good morning. We're going to talk about rock correlation today. So the whole idea, if I'm correlating something, that means I'm trying to match it up. So this one, I'm looking at the rock strata, or the rock beds, from one location, say Syracuse, and I'm looking at the rock strata from Cortland and Binghamton and Watertown, and then I'm going to try to match them up. That's done a couple different ways. One way you could do it is you could actually walk the outcrop. So you're walking along, if I have you come out on 81 in Nedrow, follow the shale from 81 in Nedrow through Syracuse, that one is close enough that you could actually do that. You will not want to walk the outcrop if I'm asking you to do it from Watertown to Binghamton, because you're going to lose that rock outcrop. It's not going to be all along 81 exposed. If you can't walk the outcrop because your objects, the locations are too far away, or that you lose that rock strata, you're going to probably use index fossils. In order for a fossil to be considered an index fossil, it's got to be unique. It can't look like every other fossil. It needs to be widespread. That means I'm not just finding it here in central New York. I'm finding it throughout New York State, throughout the United States, and throughout the world. I need it, the further it's different locations, that's easier it's going to be to correlate. The other thing is, I don't want it to live forever. I want it to live for a short amount of time. Not as an organism, but as a species. Because if it lives for hundreds of millions of years, that's not going to help me to narrow down the time in which it lived. Another thing I could do is use key beds. Key beds would be something like volcanic ash, something that's not happening every day. We have somewhere on the earth, sand is getting deposited, silt's getting deposited, shale to make sandstone or siltstone, that's happening somewhere every day. Volcanic eruptions, not happening every day. So that's going to be unique. It's almost going to act as an index fossil. It's unique, it's widespread because the wind is going to carry that ash. Short amount of time, because if you look at Mount St. Helens, that ash was in the air for about 4 or 5 years. Really short amount of time. In order to form a fossil, and it needs to be well preserved. That one, I need quick burial. The quicker it gets buried so that it's not decaying apart. The other thing is you want small size sediments so you can get more detail. So something like clay or silt give you better detail. The larger particles, you're not going to get that imprint as well. Petrified wood. I'm sure you guys talked about petrified wood last year in biology. The whole idea the wood atoms are actually replaced by minerals. Other fossils can be things as not just the organisms, but footprints. You leave behind, they get buried, borings, which are little holes, trails, or burrows. All right, I'm going to go over your Earth Science Reference Table, page 3. We have looked at it before for latitude and longitude. Now we need to look at it for geological periods and eras in New York State. So if I'm looking at Syracuse, New York, find Syracuse. Notice which way the lines are going. I need you finding those lines down here. These are actually organized by the law of superposition. Oldest on the bottom, youngest at the top. So if I'm looking for it, I have Silurian. So our bedrock here in Syracuse is Silurian. See the little parentheses here? That's saying the Devonian and Silurian, you have similar rocks. So Devonian and Silurian, you both have limestone, shale, sandstone, and conglomerates. But Silurian, we also have salt, gypsum, and hematite. Which makes sense because we're the Salt City. Alright, so the bedrock type for Silurian here in Syracuse, limestone, shale, sandstone, conglomerate, and salt, gypsum, and hematite. If I went to, say, Ithaca I can find out that Ithaca is Devonian. Devonian is limestone, shale, sandstone, conglomerate. This also helps me figure out not only the rock type, but also which area is older. So if I want to compare, say, let's go with Kingston to Oswego. So Kingston's just on the border, dot, 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 so it's Devonian. If I'm looking at Oswego, I have that line on an angle, which is going to be Ordovician. So oldest on the bottom, youngest on the top. So I can say the bedrock in Oswego is older than the bedrock in Kingston. So it's going to give me a comparative. If I'm looking at Riverhead, New York, it's in Long Island. Riverhead compared to, say, Albany. Look at symbols. Riverhead is Cretaceous and Pleistocene. Very young. Albany, I'm looking at Albany, is Ordovician. So you would say the Riverhead in New York's bedrock or rock material is younger than Albany. So that's how you're going to use that. This page is also used interchangeably with page 2. So if I'm looking at the Adirondacks, I want to know what's older. The Adirondack Mountains are the Catskills. So I'm looking at where my Adirondacks would be. They're up here. If I'm looking to see where my Catskills are, they're right here. So if I look at Catskills, once again, Catskills are Devonian. If I look at my Adirondacks are really old. They're what, Middle Proterozoic? So the Adirondacks are older than the Catskills. So you can use page 2 and 3 interchangeably. So 2 is going to give you your general landscape regions. Page 3 is going to give you your cities, the bedrock, what type of rock it's made out of. So you can figure out what's older, what's younger, along with your latitude and longitude. All right, I'll be back to talk to you about page 8 and 9. All right, I'm on page 8 and 9 of your science reference table. I'm going to start on page 8 all the way over on the left-hand side. We're going to look at increments of time. The largest increment is going to be eon, all the way over to the left. If I look at eon, I have my Precambrian and my Phanerozoic. So if I want to look at my Precambrian, I'm going to zoom in a little more for this one. And I'm trying to figure out how old the Earth is. Well, the Earth is estimated, the Earth in our solar system, if I read over, is estimated to be 4.6 billion years, or 4,600 million years. Because you'll notice at the top, it says millions of years ago. 4.6 billion, or 4,600 million. Now, with this one, I keep reading. My oldest known rock. So all this information that's right here, I read towards the left. Oldest known rock, if you're looking at it, it's approximately, read over, about 4.2 billion years ago. Evidence of biological carbon, you're looking at about 3.8 billion years ago. Earliest stromatolites. Now, they're my oldest microfossil. If I'm reading over there, I'm about 3.4 billion years. Oceanic oxygen. This is produced by cyanobacteria. This is huge for us right here. This is going to be during this time period. All right, oceanic oxygen begins to enter the atmosphere. That's going to have a huge change on what kind of animals, or organisms I should really say, organisms that can actually live on land. So all this, you're going to remember, you're going to read over. So if I'm looking at my eon, of my Precambrian. We're going to subdivide it into Archean, late, middle, early, or Proterozoic, late, middle, early. Early, obviously, it happened first. So if I'm looking at first sexually reproducing organism, that's going to happen during my Precambrian, true. But if I want to get a little more specific, my middle Proterozoic. So remember, anything written here, you're reading to the left. These numbers are millions of years, as it says. My Precambrian, if I'm coming down here, is that dark black line. So this information down here, also Precambrian. So soft body organisms, really hard to get a good fossil. Think if you're trying to make a fossil of a jellyfish, that doesn't happen so easily. Now if I'm looking at my Phanerozoic for my air is going to separate into 3 different categories: Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic. Obviously the Paleozoic is going to have the most time of the 3. And currently we're in the Cenozoic. Because remember, just like the law of superposition, oldest on the bottom, youngest at the top. I'm going to take my error and I'm going to subdivide it into periods. So if I'm looking down here, my Paleozoic, Cambrian is my first one, then Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous. Carboniferous is going to be separated into Mississippian and Pennsylvanian. Then I have Permian. What you'll notice is anytime I go from one era to another, because it's usually because of mass extinction. So if I read over here at my intersection between my Mesozoic and my Paleozoic, I have mass extinction of many land and marine organisms, including my trilobites. Come up here, I'm in my Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous. My dinosaur people, I know you're used to hearing those 3. All right, at the end of that one, at the intersection between the Cenozoic and the Mesozoic, again, mass extinction, dinosaurs, ammonoids, and many land plants. So remember, I said anytime you go from one era to the next, there's always mass extinction. All right, so Cenozoic is what we're currently in. Alright, so Cenozoic, we have Paleogene, Neogene, and Quaternary. Quaternary is what we're currently in. Now, their next little smaller increment of time are epochs. For most of them, you'll see them as early, middle, and late, until we get to the Cenozoic. Cenozoic, then we get a little more precise. Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, Miocene, Pliocene, Pleistocene. Pleistocene you read on when you took your weathering and erosion test. They talked about the glaciers during the Pleistocene period. Alright, there's Pleistocene, and we're in the Holocene currently. So here's our millions of years ago. So if I want to know Jurassic period, if I'm looking at the Jurassic period started, let me look, at 200 million years ago and ended at 146 million years ago. So that would be my Jurassic. So all you're doing is you're reading over to get your numbers. Same thing with any of the others. You're reading over to get your numbers. The next column, life on Earth. These are the organisms that we have fossil record of. So if I go all the way down into my Precambrian, alright, that shows that what? We talked about soft body organisms, stromatolites. I will look for a video for you on stromatolites, so this way you actually know what they are. They still have stromatolites in Australia. So if you look at when we have the Precambrian going to the Cambrian, there's a huge diversity of land life organisms. So we look here, now we're into Cambrian, is my earliest records of my trilobites. So if I come over here, I'm going to speed you over to page 9. So do you see the line that says trilobites? Because right now I'm in time distribution of fossils, including important fossils in New York State. So my family name is trilobites. Letters A, B, and C correspond to the letters at the bottom. These three are my trilobites. Letter A, organism A, if I read over, occurred during the Cambrian period. Letter B, organism, was during Ordovician. And letter C, reading over, during the Devonian. So if I look at the early, they evolved over time, A to B to C. A from B, your hood got larger and the body got shorter. And then if I went to C, it lost its hood. So it evolved. Remember, adapt or die. You talked about that with biology. So the family names are here. The letters correspond to the organisms down here. If you're trying to figure out what period they lived, you just want to read straight, you want to read straight over. See what period, era, or eon they are living. Alright, so I can figure out what organisms lived at the same time period, which organisms lived before, and when the line stops, that means they became extinct. So I can also figure out what organisms lived for the shortest amount of time. So if I'm looking, that's letter R. It's my placoderm, also known as my armored fish. They had an exoskeleton. So if I look at R, here's my placoderm fish. Most of these organisms are aquatic. Most of them are in the water. So if I'm looking over here, I'm back to life on Earth. Using a reference table, try to figure out what came first. Let's go with insects, flowering plants, and grasses. So I need you looking. Insects, flowering plants, and grasses. Alright, if I'm looking, anybody find your insects? What time period were our earliest insects? Here we go. Earliest insects, back in the Silurian. Flowering plants, earliest flowering plants, it was up in the Cretaceous. Earliest grasses, I'm looking at Paleogene. So if I put them in order, I give them to you in order. Insects, flowering plants, grasses. Alright, next one. What's older? Coral reefs or dinosaurs? Well, here's my earliest dinosaurs in the Triassic. How old are my first coral reefs? I read down until I find coral reefs. First coral reefs, Ordovician. So obviously, my coral reefs came before my dinosaurs. If you have questions, make sure you ask me. Sliding into important geological events in New York State. Same thing. If I am trying to figure out when the Catskill Delta formed, I'm going to find the Catskill Delta, and I'm going to read over. I can figure out what organisms were living at that same time period, and I can tell you it's during the Devonian time period. All right, if it's asking period or if it's asking era, just make sure you know what question is being asked. If I asked you what time period, Grenville orogeny, your mountain building. That one is in the shaded area, so that's Precambrian. You can look here and figure out what time period or how old this is. Pangea begins to break up. If I read over, Triassic. If I want to know what era, Mesozoic. If I want to know what eon, Phanerozoic. Last column, we looked at with plate tectonics. The whole idea, remember, this is North America. So over time, you can figure out, and this is the equator, how the continents have shifted over time. So the gray arrow is pointing to what time. So it's going to be in between. So this one here, if I read over, keep reading, that picture is in between the Devonian and Carboniferous time period. Remember, these are the organisms that correspond to here. When the line stops, that means they become extinct. If they're still going, that means we have them currently. Hope this helps. You're going to need to use it on your labs. All right, good luck. Okay, the one thing I forgot to mention on page 8 of your reference table was this column, known as New York Rock Record. All right, if you have the black in that section, that means they have evidence or they have found rock record to go with that time period. The gray area, as it shows right here, is sediments. So if you look at your reference table, you'll notice that the areas right here in the Permian, there has been no rock record, nor in the Paleogene or Neogene. All right, there's no rock record. Do I think that rocks or sediments were never deposited in those millions of years? No. Do you know what's underneath the field, the all-purpose field? No. Could it have been eroded away? Possibly. Or have it possibly never been discovered yet? All right, so that one is the one thing I did not talk to you about on your reference table, page 8. So when you don't see anything, we don't have any rock record in New York State. Here's the other thing, little reminder. We talked about this with rocks and minerals. Remember, sedimentary rocks are deposited how? Horizontally. So if you come across a principle of original horizontality, it means that sedimentary rocks were deposited horizontally. If they've been tilted, something's changed. Just a little reminder on that one. All right, good luck.